Basketball is in trouble, but I have the solution. So sit back and relax. We're going to fix what's going on in the NBA right now. So in the NBA, we all know about the tanking. The tanking is not the problem. The system is the problem, okay? Because the system, the way it is structured, it allows these teams to tank in a lot of different creative ways that they've been doing over the last couple of years, particularly this season when you talk about teams. Making players sit down, not playing a second of back-to-backs, these phantom injuries, players saying, they leg hurt or whatever, when they can actually go out and play. For these GMs and these owners to manipulate the standings. So here's a solution to the problem in the NBA. We do not reward losing basketball because that's what this system dictates. The system is the problem, and it's allowing these teams to get rewarded for losing basketball games, and they get rewarded by being in the lottery. So I have the solution to this problem. You do not reward these losing franchises by putting them in the lottery. So the NBA needs to take away what the NBA lottery looks like right now. And for those of you who don't know, the NBA draft lottery, the way it works, there are 30 teams in the NBA. There are 8 teams that make the playoffs in the East and the Western Conference. So that's 16 teams. The teams that don't make the playoffs typically are in the draft lottery, those 14 teams. The NBA needs to get rid of the 14-team draft lottery and make it 8 teams. They'll say, Jay, why would they make it 8 teams? This is how you make it competitive again. This is how you change it from owners manipulating games and trying to lose and get them incentivized to win. In the NBA, when they do the NBA standings to get into the playoffs, the top 6 seeds in the East and the top 6 teams in the West are automatically in the playoffs. The teams that are ranked 7, 8, 9, and 10 in the East and West go in what's called a play-in tournament. When you get in a play-in tournament, you basically, the 7 seed plays the 10 seed, the 8 plays the 9, and they play in a tournament style to get in the playoffs, to get those last 2 seeds. So there's 4 seeds trying to get the 7th and 8th seed to complete the playoff bracket. The way the NBA should do it is the top or the bottom 4 seeds, 7, 8, 9, and 10 in the East, and 7, 8, 9, and 10 in the West, those 8 teams are the new NBA draft lottery. Think about what that does for the NBA. These teams that are bottom feeding, trying to lose games, do not get rewarded by getting the number 1 draft pick or even the top 8 picks. This incentivizes teams to actually play and compete, want to get into the playoffs, and those teams that actually get in the play-in, that is your lottery. Okay? The team that has the lowest record, which is the 10th seed in the East and West, they get the most lottery balls, ping pong balls, when it comes to draft lottery. This is why it incentivizes teams to do it. Most teams that are in that play-in scenario are usually 1 or 2 players away from being a contender or a good playoff team. So if you're rewarding them by giving them the number 1, number 2 draft pick, getting them a lottery pick, then they can actually put some competitive balance against the rest of the teams that are actually good, the 1 through 6 teams. The incentive is that. So now you're actually playing for something. Now these teams will actually allow these players to get in games and try to at least get into the play-in. So a team like Charlotte, a team like Utah, right? A team that has been bad for years. Now they have an opportunity and an incentive to try to get into the play-in because they could be probably 1 player away. Think about it. Utah is losing games left and right trying to get a Darren Peterson from Kansas or AJ DeBasler from Utah, from BYU, right? Keep him home. I don't think they should be rewarded for sitting Jaren Jackson and Laurie Marketing in the second half of back-to-backs or the second half of games. Now we're going to reward them with the player they want? No. Try to get into the playoffs. Show that you want to compete and then you have the opportunity to get in the draft lottery. That's the way it should be done. It helps competition. Teams actually have something to play for, and it eliminates this draft lottery where we got to wait for 14 teams to pick and give 14 teams an opportunity by rewarding them by saying, oh, you guys didn't make the playoffs, so all of you get an opportunity to get the number one pick. That needs to be eliminated. It takes care of teams trying to tank, and it incentivizes competition. Now, there's only 8 draft lottery spots, and the only way to get them is if you actually are in the play-in tournament. So now y'all say, what about the other teams that didn't get in? What about the terrible teams, the teams that actually need help? It's not like they don't get good picks. You still have 9 through 30, and the way that they should do 9 through 30, after those first 8 picks, the teams that actually get in the play-in tournament and get an opportunity to do the draft lottery, 9 through 30, they should do it NFL style. And the way it's done in the NFL, the worst team gets the number one pick. So that's how it should go. Now, if you're the worst team in the NBA, you still are getting a good draft pick. You're getting the 9th pick. But you're not going to be rewarded in a lottery for being bad. And some people say, well, all these bad teams don't tank. They're just not talented. Right. This is competition at the highest level. What are these GMs and owners trying to do to actually compete? Are they just taking fans' money? Right? Are they just being just good enough to get fans to come watch them play, but never really wanting to be good, never really wanting to pay players? So you're not going to get rewarded for mediocrity. That's what this whole tanking thing is about. The system itself is rewarding mediocrity. And the state of the NBA now, where Adam Silver is fining these teams $500,000, $1 million, that's nothing to a billionaire. These billionaire owners will pay that left and right. If it means they have the opportunity to get the number one pick in the draft, they're going to make that money back tenfold off of us fans because we're going to come to see that number one pick. So they're going to risk tanking, getting fined $7, $8, $9 million after the season's over to get that number one draft pick because they're going to make that money back in jersey sales, TV deals, and fans coming to games. So let's stop rewarding mediocrity and let's change the format altogether. So that's how they should do the NBA. Let's get rid of the normal standard NBA draft lottery, take the 14 teams out. The draft lottery consists of the 8 teams that actually make it into the play-in tournament because those teams are trying to win basketball games. Those teams are actually trying to get to the playoffs, and they're probably one team away from getting there. So now y'all gonna say, well, Jay, what if teams that are a 5 seed or a 6 seed start to tank so they can get in that play-in spot? This is why it's a lottery, because the 7th or the 8th seed is not going to get the number one seed. Statistically, more lottery balls are going to go to that 10th seed, which essentially the 10th seed is already in the draft lottery anyway by the current format. These teams are already in the draft lottery anyway, right? Because now it's 14. But what it does is it stops the teams that are at the bottom of the barrel from staying there and actually having to compete. It's called competitive balance, okay? I'm not worried about the top teams in the NBA because those teams actually want to win. Here's a secret you guys probably don't know. In the NBA, there are probably 5 legitimate teams every year that believe that they can win the championship. I know that there's 30 teams. You have the top 5 teams in the NBA that actually are trying to win a championship, the organization as a whole, everybody. Then you have the middle of the pack teams who are trying to get to that level and are comfortable being just good enough to make the playoffs. That's enough for their franchise. And then you have the bottom of the NBA who doesn't give a damn. The owners just want to make money. They're going to make you believe they want to compete and they really don't. And the reason it is that way is because of the system. The players aren't the reason why the NBA tanks. The players want to play. It's the GMs and the owners that think like billionaires and think like this is a business. These are assets that I can move around and manipulate and continue to make money. So the way to make it competitive is to reward the teams that actually are trying to compete and give them an opportunity to get to that next level. Think about it. If there's 30 teams in the NBA, wouldn't you want to see 25, 20 of those teams actually compete and be good enough? Gives a little more parity to the league. And then you're going to have bottom feeders. You're going to have your 5, 6 teams that aren't good, but it's better than having 10 teams that aren't good. That's a third of the NBA. So think about it. Do we want to change how the NBA looks in terms of what they do with this NBA draft? How do we fix the lottery? How do we change the narrative about all these teams just wanting to tank? This is how we do it. Those 8 teams that get into the play-in, that is the new draft lottery. And then from 9 to 30, we go from worst to first. And then in the second round of the NBA draft, that whole draft is NBA or NFL style. The worst team gets the number 1 pick in the second round. And then you go all the way up to the first place team. They get the last pick. And then obviously there's trades, and whoever has draft picks, those draft picks get to teams, whatever. But the structure and the format should be that way. Those top 8 teams that get draft picks should be the ones that are actually trying to win. Reward the teams that want to be better. And then the rest of the draft plays out from worst to first. Am I crazy? Does that make sense? A little bit more competitive balance for the game we love to watch in the NBA, right? A lot of these, and it'll trickle down to college basketball. You won't have players sitting out of games, not going to workouts, trying to move from one city to another, trying to get their agents to get them to a team that actually is competitive. Now it incentivizes these college players because now they're looking to see, oh, there's a team that's probably 1 player away. Or there's a team that's actually Atlanta. They're usually in a play-in. Chicago's usually in a play-in. Toronto. Like, oh, these are good cities, good franchises historically, and they actually have players good enough around a number 1 draft pick to make a difference. Because the downside to what else is happening here is player development. The players that go to these terrible franchises don't develop because they're not in a good system. They don't develop. 2-3 years down the road, we're wondering what happened to these players. They get drafted based off potential. They're not ready to play at a high level because they're playing around a bunch of losers. Let's just call it what it is. You go to a bad franchise, the whole organization is a bunch of damn losers. So we're not doing anything but hurting the future of the game by allowing these terrible franchises to pick these highly touted guys out of college, and then they go to losing franchises. These kids have never lost this much in their life. Think of a player like Cooper Flagg. Dallas is actually a good franchise. They happen to get the number 1 pick. But for example, think of when like Joel Embiid went to the 76ers when they were saying trust the process, that period of time. He probably never lost 8 games in his entire life and went to the 76ers and they lost 70 games, right? What does that do to a player, a young player? What does that do to their psyche? What does that do to their confidence coming into the league? What's going to motivate them to get better if they're around a bunch of losers in a losing franchise with a loser owner, with a loser general manager that just cares about the bottom line? I think this solution changes all of that because now you have franchises that are actually in the business of trying to compete, getting players that are trying to compete. And the teams that are not good, it incentivizes them to get better. All right? So that's what I think. Y'all comment below, let me know. Does this solution sound crazy? Let's change the NBA draft lottery to 8 teams, the teams that make the play-in, and then switch the rest of the draft to an NFL format. All right? Yo, you made it to the end of the video. That's dope. We basically family now. If you love watching real sports talk with unbiased takes, be sure to click on the logo and subscribe for more.